Imagine you arrive in a city and enter the first house you see. A hot dinner awaits you on the table. A cigarette is still smoking in the ashtray, but there's no one around. Where do thousands of people disappear in one night? Is it mass hysteria, secret government experiments, or perhaps we've encountered something that science simply has no name for? Today, we will visit 13 cursed places scattered around the world. We will walk through ruins where life once thrived and now there is not a soul. But I must warn you, if the first stories on this list merely tickle your nerves, the last 3 places go beyond the reasonable. A story that is rightfully considered patient zero of all American nightmares. If you think Roanoke is just a boring paragraph from a textbook, you are mistaken. This is a real thriller whose ending has been unknown for 4 centuries. Let's travel back to 1587, the wild shores of North America. 115 Englishmen arrive here. It is important to understand that this was not a special forces detachment or mercenaries. These were ordinary families. Carpenters, farmers, pregnant women, and children. They had one dream: to build a new home at the end of the world. The leader was John White. He leaves the most precious things on the island: his daughter and his newborn granddaughter, the first Englishwoman born in America. White sails to England for supplies, promising to return in 3 months. He didn't know that 3 months would turn into 3 years of hell. Due to the war with Spain, he found himself trapped in Europe, knowing that his family across the ocean was alone without food and protection. White only breaks through to return in August 1590. Ironically, he lands on the shore on his granddaughter's birthday. He runs to the settlement with gifts, his heart pounding. He expects to see smoke from hearths, but he is met by a ringing, dead silence. No dog barking, no children's laughter, no one. The most eerie thing is that it didn't look like a massacre site. There were no bodies, blood, or ashes. The settlement was neatly disassembled, houses dismantled, belongings gone. 115 people simply vanished. In the center of the camp, White finds the only clue that drives researchers mad to this day. A strange word, Croatoan, was carved into a palisade post. And here's a detail that sends shivers down your spine. Before leaving, White had agreed on a secret sign with the settlers. If they had to leave in trouble, if they were attacked or taken by force, they were supposed to carve a Maltese cross nearby. White frantically searched every tree, every inch of bark. There was no cross. This meant only one thing. 100 people packed their belongings and left into the unknown voluntarily, without panic. Where? Croatoan is a neighboring island where Indians lived. It seemed the answer was found. White was eager to go there immediately, but as if on a horror movie script, a monstrous storm began. The ship's anchor broke and the captain issued a harsh ultimatum. Either they sail to England now, or they all drown together. White sailed away. He died alone, never knowing what happened to his family. Modern science, examining old maps and studying DNA, suggests that the colonists may have assimilated among the Indians. But the fact remains. An entire city disappeared, leaving us only one word on a tree and an eternal mystery. Varosha, Cyprus, a place that proves the apocalypse can arrive on the sunniest and most carefree day. If you had been here in the early 70s, you would have thought you had stumbled upon paradise. Varosha was the Mediterranean Las Vegas. Golden beaches, Europe's most expensive hotels, champagne flowing like a river. Elizabeth Taylor sunbathed here, and Brigitte Bardot sat in the bars. Apartments here were booked 20 years in advance. It seemed this celebration of life would last forever. But in August 1974, time here didn't just stop, it died. When the Turkish army began its offensive, 40,000 residents and tourists were trapped. People were in such a panic that they fled literally in what they were wearing. No one packed suitcases. Everyone thought, we'll be back in a couple of days when everything calms down. They left the lights on, food on the stoves, and open books on nightstands. They didn't return a day later nor a year later. Half a century has passed. Today, Varosha is arguably the most expensive and eerie open-air museum. The city was surrounded by barbed wire watchtowers with soldiers were erected, and entry was forbidden under threat of execution. And thanks to this isolation, a chilling time capsule has been preserved inside. Imagine you crawl through a hole in the fence and find yourself in 1974. You approach a car dealership, and behind the dusty window stand brand new 1974 Toyota Corollas. They have zero mileage factory film on the seats, but the tires have long rotted and the metal is eaten by rust. Cars that never saw the road. You walk further into a fashionable boutique. On the mannequins hang bell-bottoms, bright shirts, and disco-style dresses. Clothes that were the height of fashion half a century ago still hang on hangers, slowly turning into dust. In the apartments, the picture is even more terrifying. There are traces of past life everywhere. Petrified remains of breakfasts are found on tables. Children's toys wait for their owners in closets. Calendars on the walls are forever stuck on August 1974. Nature here is slowly devouring civilization. Asphalt is broken by tree roots. Seagulls nest in the halls of elite hotels. And only lizards now run through the streets where Rolls-Royces once drove. Varosha is a grim reminder of how fragile our comfort is. In just a couple of hours, an elite resort turned into a horror movie set, where the only residents are ghosts of the past and patrolling soldiers. Hashima, Japan. If the previous place was a lost paradise, this is a real concrete hell, frozen in the middle of the ocean. You've probably seen this silhouette. From afar, this island looks not like a piece of land, but like a huge warship ready for battle. That's why the Japanese call it Gunkanjima, Battleship Island. And by the way, this is where the main villain's lair in the James Bond movie 007 Skyfall was filmed. But the real story of this place is much darker than any movie script. In the mid-20th century, Hashima was not just a mining town. It was the most densely populated place on Earth in human history. Imagine a tiny speck of rock the size of a couple of football fields, on which dozens of multi-story concrete anthills were built. The population density here was 9 times higher than in modern Tokyo. People literally lived on top of each other. There were no parks, trees, or lawns here, only bare gray concrete. To go from home to school or a shop, you didn't even need to go outside. The entire island was connected by a labyrinth of corridors, staircases, and passages. Life here buzzed around the clock. The roar of coal mining, the shouts of merchants, children's laughter, the clinking of slot machines. It was a single living organism, a resource extraction machine. But in 1974, the heart of this machine stopped. Coal became unnecessary. Japan switched to oil. Mitsubishi Corporation announced the closure of the mine. And what happened next is striking in its speed. The city, which had been built for decades, became empty instantly. Residents had only 3 months to pack their belongings and leave. Ferries left one after another, overloaded with people. There wasn't enough space for luggage, so people abandoned everything they couldn't carry in their hands. Today, Hashima is a dead concrete skeleton, slowly chewed by the salty sea. Waves during storms wash over the protective walls, flooding the empty streets. If you, like a stalker, sneak inside these houses, which is officially forbidden and dangerous as the building is collapsing, you will see frozen life from the 70s. Old black and white televisions covered with a layer of dust, textbooks left on desks in school, plates left on tables, rusty children's bicycles in the corridors. It's not the mystique that's scary here, but the realization of how replaceable we are. As long as there was coal, life was booming here. The resource ran out and thousands of people disappeared, leaving behind only an empty concrete shell, where now only the wind is the master. Centralia, Pennsylvania. A place that became the real physical prototype for the city from the movie and game Silent Hill. If you remember that eerie atmosphere, ash falling from the sky like snow, cracks in the asphalt, and thick fog, well, the screenwriters didn't have to invent anything. They simply copied it from Centralia. At first glance, it was a typical American postcard town. Neat houses, a Sunday school, neighbors barbecuing. But in May 1962, they made one fatal mistake that opened a portal to hell. The city council decided to clear a garbage dump in the simplest way. Burn it. They didn't consider one thing. The dump was located in an abandoned coal mine shaft. The fire, which they thought they had extinguished, actually went deep underground and ignited huge deposits of anthracite. At first, residents didn't notice anything, but soon the city began to turn into a giant microwave oven. Imagine it's winter, snow is on the ground, but the earth in Centralia is warm. Tomatoes in the gardens ripened unnaturally fast, and sometimes literally cooked right on the branches. In the basements of houses, the temperature rose to 80 degrees. People complained of constant headaches and fatigue. This invisible carbon monoxide slowly poisoned them in their sleep. The point of no return was a day in 1981. A 12-year-old boy, Todd Domboski, was quietly playing in his backyard. Suddenly, the ground beneath his feet simply opened up. A hole several meters deep formed, from which poisonous smoke billowed. The boy miraculously managed to grab onto a tree root and hung over this boiling crater until his cousin pulled him out. At that moment, everyone understood that living here meant waiting to be swallowed alive by the underworld. The authorities decided to evacuate the city. Almost all houses were demolished by bulldozers. Centralia was erased from U.S. zip codes. If you go there today, you will see a realistic grid of streets. There are sidewalks, there are roads, stop signs are standing, but there are no houses. Around you is only forest and silence. But the scariest thing is not this. The scariest thing is the smoke that still, 60 years later, seeps from cracks in the asphalt. The ground there is hot to the touch. The underground fire has not subsided. According to scientists' calculations, there is enough coal there for this underground bonfire to burn for at least another 250 years. Centralia is a reminder that hell is not somewhere in myths, but literally under our feet, and we ourselves ignited it. Kayaköy, Turkey. Forget about the noisy bazaars, baklava, and all-inclusive hotels for a moment. This place is the dark, silent underside of sunny Turkey that ordinary tourists try not to show. Imagine you are climbing the slope of a picturesque mountain. The sun shines brightly, birds sing, but before you, a panorama unfolds that makes you uneasy. Thousands of houses, hundreds of narrow streets, schools, churches, pharmacies. But all these buildings have one eerie feature. They have no roofs and no windows. It looks like a huge stone skeleton spread across the hills, a city of the dead. The history of this place is tragic, but it is the mystical ending that makes it terrifying. Until 1923, Greeks lived here. The city was called Levisi, and their life here was thriving. But then big politics decided the fate of thousands of ordinary people. A so-called population exchange occurred between Greece and Turkey. Residents were given to understand, this is no longer your land. Pack up, you have a couple of days. People left in tears, kissing the walls of their homes, believing they would one day return. They never returned. But the strangest thing happened next. New residents, Muslims from Greece, came here to the vacant homes. It would seem that here's a ready-made house, strong walls, an inhabited place, move in and live. But the new settlers refused to live there. Local legends say that the air in Kayaköy was so saturated with the grief and longing of the exiled people that it was physically impossible to stay there. The new residents complained of an oppressive atmosphere, strange sounds at night, and a feeling that the walls were literally driving them out. The place was branded as bad and cursed. In the end, people descended into the valley and built new, albeit simple, houses just to avoid living within alien walls. and the rich stone city was left to die. Tiles and wooden frames were removed from the houses to be used as firewood or building materials, leaving only bare stone boxes. Today, when you walk through Kayakoi at sunset, the shadows from the walls lengthen, turning the empty window openings into black eye sockets. Tourists often say that there is always a strange ringing silence here, even at noon. Kayakoi is a monument not to war, but to human grief, which turned out to be so strong that it transformed a flourishing city into an exclusion zone where no one wants to live, even for free. Wittenoom, Australia. If other cities die their own death, this city was sentenced to the death penalty by its own government. Imagine a place so dangerous that the authorities not only closed it, they removed it from maps, erased its name from road signs, cut off electricity, and stopped delivering mail. They did everything so that you would never, under any circumstances, find your way there. Because Wittenoom is Australia's Chernobyl, only without a reactor explosion. In the 1950s, it was a prosperous mining town. People came here for a long dollar and a happy life. It seemed they had found a gold mine, but the mine was not gold, but blue. Blue asbestos was mined here. Back then, no one knew it was a ticking time bomb. People literally lived inside a poisonous cloud. Asbestos was everywhere. They sprinkled it on roads to prevent dust. They filled children's sandboxes with it because it was a beautiful blue color and soft to the touch. Children played in deadly dust, molded castles from it, and parents smiled watching them. The realization came too late. Blue asbestos consists of microscopic needles. When you inhale them, they embed themselves in your lungs and stay there forever, causing cancer and agonizing death. Moreover, it doesn't kill immediately, but after 20 to 30 years. People began to die in families. When the scale of the disaster became clear, the government made an unprecedented decision. The city must disappear. People were forcibly evicted. Those who refused to leave were cut off from civilization. Today, Wittenoom is a backdrop for a movie about the end of the world in the middle of the red Australian desert. Frightening signs are everywhere. Danger to life. Do not enter. Breathing forbidden. This is no joke. Asbestos fibers still lie there on the ground and in the air. One unfortunate gust of wind, one deep breath, is enough to start a countdown in your body. Wittenoom is a ghost town that continues to kill even after its official death. The scariest place on the continent, where silence is literally poisonous. Villa Epecuén, Argentina. If Atlantis truly existed, it must have looked exactly like this after resurfacing. This is the story of a town that drowned, spent a quarter century underwater, and then rose from the depths, but it returned already dead. In the early 80s, it was a super popular resort. It was called the Argentine Dead Sea. The water here was so salty that it kept a person afloat. Tourists came by the thousands to improve their health, stroll along the embankment, and spend money in luxurious restaurants. The town flourished, but nature had its own plans. On November 10th, 1985, after prolonged heavy rains, the earthen dam protecting the town gave way. Water flooded the streets. It wasn't a tsunami, it was a slow, agonizing suffocation. The water rose centimeter by centimeter, first to the ankles, then to the waist, then the roofs of houses disappeared. Soon the town sank to the bottom to a depth of 10 meters. It disappeared from maps for 25 long years, and then something unexpected happened. The climate changed, and the water began to recede. The town reappeared on the surface, and what people saw looked scarier than any movie about nuclear winter. Epecuén returned white, absolutely white. The salty water preserved the ruins, covering every brick, every chair, and every tree with a thick layer of corrosive salt. Today, this place looks like a set for the bleakest post-apocalypse. The trees here stand, but they are dead. Salt has eaten away the bark, leaving only bleached skeletal trunks reaching for the sky. You walk through the streets, crunching salt under your feet. Around you are rusty bed frames sticking out of hotel ruins, remnants of cars from which only frames remain, broken dishes, children's toys turned into salt statues. It is incredibly quiet and bright here because the sun reflects off the white ruins. Villa Epequen is a chilling monument to the elements, vividly demonstrating everything we build can be taken from us in an instant, and nature will then simply spit out the remains of our civilization like unwanted trash. Kuldhara, India. A story that sounds like an ancient fairy tale, if not for the fact that the empty ruins still stand there, frightening the locals to shivers. We move to the Rajasthan desert. Here, among the sands, stands the ghost village. But Kuldhara is not alone. It was the capital of an entire community. And here's the mystery. In one single night in 1825, the inhabitants of Kuldhara and 83 other neighboring villages disappeared. Think about the scale. Thousands of people, women, old people, children, livestock, all of them dissolved into the darkness within a few hours, leaving no traces or notes. Legend has it that the cause was not war or hunger, but honor and a curse. In those days, the region was ruled by a cruel and lustful prime minister, Salim Singh. One day, he set his eyes on the beautiful daughter of the headman of Kuldhara village. He issued an ultimatum. Either you give me the girl tomorrow at dawn, or I will wipe your village off the face of the earth and raise taxes so high that you will starve to death. The residents faced an impossible choice, but instead of submitting to the tyrant, they did the impossible. The elders of the 4 villages gathered for a council and decided the honor of the daughter is more important than houses and riches. We will leave. At night, under the cover of darkness, thousands of people gathered the bare necessities and left their homes in which their ancestors had lived for 500 years. No one knows where they went, but before leaving, they laid a terrible curse on this land. No one will ever be able to live here again. And you know what? The curse works. From the 19th century to this day, Kuldhara stands empty. Did people try to settle there again? Of course. But everyone who tried to spend the night there fled in terror, telling stories of strange shadows, whispers, and the sensation of icy hands on their necks. Today, this place is protected as an archaeological site. During the day, tourists walk around, photographing beautiful stone ruins. But as soon as the sun touches the horizon, the gates close. Locals believe that at night, the ghosts of those who were forced to leave their homes return, and disturbing them means signing your own death warrant. Poveglia Island, Italy, a place that makes even hardened skeptics' blood run cold. If you stroll through sunny Venice, ride gondolas, and drink wine, you'll hardly notice a small island in the distance, but locals never look in its direction. For them, Poveglia is cursed land, an island of no return, and they have very good reasons for that. The history of this place is like a layered cake of human suffering. It all started in the Middle Ages when the Black Death, the plague, came to Europe. Venice, as a port city, was at risk. The authorities solved the problem radically. Everyone with even the slightest signs of illness was taken to Poveglia. It was a one-way ticket. The island became a gigantic lazaret, or rather a morgue. People were thrown into huge pits and burned, often while still alive, in a pile with corpses. Fire burned here for centuries. Historians say that over 160,000 people died here during that time. Think about that number. There's a grim fact. The soil on Poveglia isn't entirely earth. The topsoil there is 50% human ash. So walking there, you are literally treading on the dust of hundreds of thousands of people. Local fishermen are still afraid to cast their nets near the island, fearing they'll catch not fish, but human bones polished by the water. But this is only the first circle of hell. In 1922, as if mocking common sense, the authorities opened a psychiatric hospital on this graveyard. Imagine the atmosphere for the patients. The sick complained of seeing burning people and hearing screams at night, but doctors attributed it to their madness. The chief physician of the clinic was a man whose name history preferred to forget. Legends say he was a sadist obsessed with finding the root of madness. He conducted monstrous experiments. Lobotomies were performed without anesthesia, using ordinary hand drills, hammers, and chisels. All of this happened in the old bell tower, away from prying eyes. In the end, the island drove him mad too. According to legend, the doctor went insane from the ghosts of his victims and threw himself from that very bell tower. They say the fall didn't kill him. He was suffocated by a strange fog that enveloped his body. In 1968, the hospital was closed. Since then, the island has been deserted. Today, Poveglia is a restricted area. The Italian Coast Guard strictly prevents any attempts to land there, officially due to the dilapidated state of the buildings, unofficially because being there is psychologically unbearable. The rare stalkers who illegally snuck in tell the same story. As soon as you step ashore, a heavy, sticky silence descends. Birds don't sing there. In the ruined wards, rusty beds and medical instruments still lie scattered. Poveglia is the most concentrated place of death on the planet, where the earth is literally saturated with pain. Anjikuni, Lake Village, Canada. This story is like a scene from the movie The Thing, only it happened in real life, in a frozen wilderness where no cry for help would be heard. Let's travel to November 1930, northern Canada. An experienced trapper, Joe LaBelle, makes his way through a snowstorm. He is tired, frozen, and dreams of only one thing, reaching the Inuit village he knew well. It was always noisy there. Dogs barked, fires burned. It was an island of life amidst the white silence. But when Joe reached the lake, he was met by silence. Absolute, unnatural silence. No smoke from the huts, no welcoming shouts. Joe entered the first dwelling and froze. Inside, everything looked as if people had left a second ago. A pot of stew stood on the hearth. It had already turned black with age. Unfinished clothing made of skins lay on the table, and a bone needle still stuck in it. Someone had abandoned their work mid-task. LaBelle moved from house to house and panic grew. Everywhere the same scene. Abandoned belongings, food on tables, but not a single living soul. And then he notices a detail that breaks all logic. Rifles stood at the entrance to the huts. It is important to understand that for an Inuit in 1930, a rifle was life. It was protection from bears and a way to get food. No sane person in the tundra would step outside without a weapon. Leaving a rifle at home meant dying, but the weapons were in their places. This meant that whatever caused them to disappear did not give them even a second to grab a rifle. Joe, in horror, ran to look for dog sleds and found something that made him sick. Dog sleds lay under the snowdrifts. They were dead. They had died of hunger. This was incomprehensible. There were food supplies in the houses, stores full of dried meat, and the priceless dogs, the main helpers in the north, had died of starvation on their leashes, waiting for their owners who never came out to feed them. But the final chord of this nightmarish symphony awaited John on the outskirts, in the local cemetery. The ground there was frozen solid, but the ancestral graves had been dug up, and they were empty. The bodies had disappeared. Animals could not have done this. The stones that had surrounded the graves were neatly stacked nearby. Someone or something took the dead along with the living. The arriving Royal Canadian Mounted Police were stumped. There was not a single trace in the snow, neither of the departing people, nor of attackers, nor of transport. 2,000 people simply vanished into the frosty air. Police recorded the testimonies of other hunters who that night saw a strange, pulsating blue light in the sky above the lake. The case remains unsolved to this day. Where an entire village disappeared, leaving food on the fire and the dead undisturbed, is unknown. Herverda, Brazil. A story with the most chilling farewell letter in human history. Welcome to Green Hell. The Amazon jungle is a place where everything tries to kill you, from poisonous frogs to jaguars. But what happened in the town of Herverda in 1923 would frighten even the most experienced survivalists. 600 people lived in this settlement. It was not a miserable camp, but a strong town with a church, a school, and plantations. But one day, communication with them was cut off. The authorities sent a group of investigators there. The journey through the jungle was difficult, but what they saw upon arrival made them forget their fatigue. The town stood, but it was absolutely dead. 600 people disappeared without a trace. The scene was painfully familiar. The doors of houses were wide open. Things were scattered as if people had fled in a wild hurry, but there was not a single body. In the jungle, where predators smell blood for miles, this was impossible. If they had been attacked by animals or bandits, there would have been bones, blood, traces of struggle. Here there was sterile cleanliness, but the investigators found two details that turned this story into a real horror. The first find, a rifle was found in one of the houses. It lay on the floor. When it was picked up, they smelled gunpowder. It had been fired very recently. Someone tried to fight back, but against whom? There were no shell casings around, no traces of an enemy. The person fired into the void and disappeared. The second find awaited them in the local school. Imagine creaking floors, empty desks, silence. The investigators enter the classroom and see an inscription on the blackboard. It was made with chalk in haste, with a trembling hand. The phrase in Portuguese read, "Spacinha net." There is no salvation, think about it. Not help, not we are under attack, not run, but there is no salvation. This sounds like a sentence, like the realization of something so inevitable and terrible that resistance is useless. What could have caused 600 people, men accustomed to living in the wild forest, to write such a thing and disappear? The official investigation came to a dead end. The jungle quickly consumed the buildings. Today, Herverde is just a dot on old maps, overgrown with vines. But the legend of the inscription on the blackboard lives on, reminding us that deep in the forest there are forces from which there is truly no salvation. Dudleytown, USA. If the previous places are simply abandoned, this place is cursed. And this is not just a beautiful metaphor for tourists. This is a place that the Connecticut state authorities guard with fanatic brutality, as if alien weapons are hidden there. Welcome to the Dark Entry Forest. Even the name sounds like a warning. In the mid-15th century, the Dudley family settled here. They fled England, trying to escape a family curse. Legend had it that one of their ancestors was beheaded for plotting against the king. And since then, a terrible fate awaits every Dudley. They thought the ocean would save them. They were wrong. Dudleytown was never a large town, but the level of madness per square meter here was off the charts. People here didn't just die, they went insane. The chronicles of this place read like a horror movie script. One farmer in the middle of a clear day claimed to see demons and killed his family. Another simply went into the forest and disappeared. And when he was found, he was completely insane and raved about beasts coming out of the trees. A general living here found his wife hanging on the porch, even though an hour before she'd been laughing and drinking tea. Gradually, residents began to notice a strange pattern. Trouble came to everyone. Fires, lightning striking houses, inexplicable suicides. By the early 20th century, the town was deserted. People abandoned their homes, allowing the forest to engulf them. But the scariest thing is happening there now. Dudleytown is officially closed, and it's not just a no trespassing sign. Local police patrol the perimeter with seriousness worthy of a military base. For attempting to enter there, you face not just a fine, but actual arrest. The official version, the landscape is dangerous and protection from vandals. But locals whisper another story. They say that birds never sing in Dudleytown. You can stand at the edge of the forest and hear chirping, but take a step into the dark zone, and a vacuum-like silence descends. The trees there grow so densely that even on a sunny afternoon, eternal twilight reigns in the forest. Stalkers who managed to sneak past the police returned with faces as white as chalk. They spoke of a feeling of primal terror that washes over you for no reason, of touches from invisible hands, and of the forest literally breathing down your neck. Why do the authorities so fiercely guard a pile of old stones in the forest? What exactly lives in these dense thickets where no birds fly? Dudleytown remains one of America's most protected anomalous zones, asserting the rule that if something is so carefully hidden, then we really are better off not seeing it. Number 13, a story that makes you reconsider everything we know about cryptozoology. If you think Bigfoot is a kind, shaggy giant from cartoons, the story of Portlock, Alaska, will make you sit up. Portlock, or Port Chatham, was a small but prosperous cannery village. Harsh people lived here: fishermen, loggers, hunters. They were not afraid of storms, frosts, or bears. But in the 1940s, something else began to frighten them. At first, it was just rumors. Hunters who went into the mountains returned pale and spoke of a giant, hairy man who watched them from the fog. The local Inuits called him Nantina, and they were not joking. For them, it was not a myth, but a real predator, an ancient evil that could not be reasoned with. In 1949, rumors turned into bloody facts. People began to disappear, but not in the way people get lost in the forest. They were found in pieces. The first prominent victim was a hunter who went to check his traps. His mutilated body was found in the forest. It had been torn apart with such inhuman force that no grizzly bear was capable of it. The head was ripped off, limbs scattered, but the scariest thing was the footprints around. These were the footprints of huge bipedal paws, 45 centimeters long. Fear paralyzed the town. Men stopped going into the forest alone, but Nantina, or whatever it was, began to approach closer to the houses. At night, residents heard eerie howls and footsteps that made dishes rattle in the cupboards. Equipment at the sawmill was found destroyed. Thick steel cables were torn like threads. The last straw was the day the sea began to wash ashore body parts of previously missing fishermen. The town realized it was being hunted, and they were the prey. The creature was not afraid of gunshots. It was aggressive, enormous, and insatiable. In 1950, perhaps the most shameful and frightening exodus in Alaskan history occurred. All the residents of Portlock, an entire community of hardened men and women, capitulated. They boarded boats and fled. They abandoned everything: homes, furniture, tools, established businesses. They ran as if death itself was chasing them. Since then, Portlock has been a dead zone. Houses have rotted and collapsed. The pier has gone underwater. But the most terrifying thing is what is happening now. Nowadays, extremists and film crews periodically sail there. For example, the Discovery Channel, and they return with the same stories. A feeling of constant surveillance, stones flying at them from the forest, and giant silhouettes in the fog. Portlock remains the only town in modern history that was officially abandoned due to an attack by an unknown creature. Where did all these people go? Did they go to another dimension? Were they victims of government purges, or did they encounter forces of nature about which we know nothing? We have traced the footsteps of 13 cursed places. Perhaps right now, as you watch this video, somewhere in the world another city is emptying, only to become the subject of a similar video in 50 years. Check if your front door is locked, and if you hear a strange noise outside your window, it's better not to look out. Subscribe, like. If you had the courage to watch to the end, see you soon.